about and what we do to people who really tell us the truth. I wonder if he was scared of what people would say behind his back and to his face. I wonder if he was ever reluctant to leave the safety and splendor of heaven to live here. He had to know what happened to him if he challenged the way things were. I wonder if he was ever nervous. And I think about the creation of the world. What a new thing that was. Think about it. Never before had a world been created. How's it going to turn out? What's going to happen? Are these people going to love me or are they going to rebel? Is it going to turn out to be a good thing or a bad thing? Is it going to make me the joy of my life or is it going to break my heart again and again? Think about it. We say God so loved the world, right? To love, I think, takes more courage than anything else. Because to love something, you open up your heart and say, here it is. There's a good chance it can be spit upon or ripped out. Probably most of you know, to love anything at all is to be vulnerable. And to be vulnerable takes courage. I think it took courage for God to live among us. It took courage for Jesus to preach the truth to people who didn't really want to hear it. It took courage to face the devil in the wilderness, what we talked about on Ash Wednesday. 40 days without food or water, and then facing this temptation. It took courage. It took courage to take on the Pharisees and do what was right, knowing that they had all the power, seemingly there. It took courage to go to Jerusalem when he knew his life would be in danger if he went to Jerusalem during Passover. He knew it would be volatile. It took courage to go out at night when he knew he was going to be betrayed. It took courage not to fight back, knowing with just a word he could knock everyone down. It took courage to stand trial and not crush Herod and Pilate with the weighty words of he who was the Word. It took courage to carry a cross, courage to be raised on a cross, courage to die on a cross. Jesus Christ was full of courage. And if Jesus was and is courageous, then we must be worshiping a courageous God. If that's the case, and I believe it is, what does that change for you? Why is that important? Why is it important that we have a courageous God? I think there's several reasons, but one I was thinking about that tends to go with how I often preach, has to do with fear. Courage usually means being able to do something despite fear of the consequences of what might happen, the unknown, the fear of being hurt. If courage means that, what does that imply? It implies that God has fear too. Have you ever thought about that? God having fear? Because immediately we think fear is a weakness, it's bad, it's wrong. God can't have fear. We want somebody in our lives who is afraid of nothing. As kids, do you remember thinking your dad, oh, he wouldn't be afraid of anything. There's a monster in my closet, but Dad will come. He'll get the monster out. He wouldn't be afraid of the monster. We want somebody in our lives who has no fear. As kids, we look up to the people who seem to have no fear. But as we grow older, we usually learn that they indeed had plenty to fear. Whether it was our parents, our favorite athlete, superheroes, or soldiers we knew, everyone has fear. So what would it mean for God to have fear? And we talked about this a lot before, the idea that the summation of the Bible, summation of the gospel, is this phrase, this command of God, do not fear. Do not fear. Saying over and over again from the beginning of Genesis to the end of Revelation, do not fear. Why does God tell us that so often? Why is that repeated over and over again in every situation? There's no need to fear. Do not fear. The reason to be afraid are gone. I think he reminds us not to fear because he knows something about fear. God knows what it can do to us. God knows the effects of fear. And more importantly, God knows how it can be overcome. The words "do not fear" might ring hollow, spoken by a robot, something who had never experienced or overcome fear before. If someone who has never really experienced fear or had their courage tested told you, "Oh, don't worry, don't be scared," what does that mean to you? We say, "Well, what do you know about it? Have you ever done this?" "Well, no." Then who are you to tell me not to fear? Same thing with God. "Oh, sure, God, you have no fear. You're almighty, omnipotent. Nothing can harm you. You tell me not to fear doesn't really do me much good. How do you know what it's like?" But God does know what it's like. Remember in the epistle to the Hebrews it says, we have a high priest, we have a God who can sympathize with us in everything as he has gone through what you have gone through. Fear and courage. We have a courageous God. One who went to his death on a cross, became obedient to death, even death on a cross. Came to earth, humbled himself, took on the form of a servant, became obedient to death on a cross. And on the other side of that experience, still can stand tall and say, "Do not fear." What does that do for you? For me, that gives me strength. It gives me courage for today and all my tomorrows. For God has courage, has overcome the fear of what might happen if he creates people like us. God has made himself vulnerable to our rejection, to our turning his back on him, but he does it because he also has the courage and the faith that we too will love him as well. And that's why God became incarnate, took on all that fear, overcame all that fear, took the cup that was given to him, even though he was scared in that garden, so much so sweating blood, was raised on a cross for the purpose and for the ability to tell us every day, 365 times in the Bible, do not fear. And it rings true because we know he has overcome it and can overcome it for us as well. We worship a courageous God. Who else can say that? Say it proudly, because you have reason not to fear. Let us pray.